again, in my last video, at the end of my last video rather, I said I would make a short video about fitting one of these, which is a 13 amp plug to a cable. Unfortunately, it's not turned out to be such a short video. The reason for that is there are lots of steps involved, and because it's a safety issue, it's something you can't really skimp. Apologies to people who are living outside the UK, because you will no doubt have a different standard of plug, a different style of plug, and I'm afraid that restricts this video a little bit. But however, if you do use these plugs and you need to fit one of these plugs, then this video may be for you. It's amazing to me how we buy very expensive pieces of kit, very expensive pieces of equipment, and quite often we neglect the fact that they rely on this to get their supply. If this isn't fitted properly, or if it's faulty, then no matter how much you spend on a piece of kit, it can be rendered useless. There's safety factors involved as well, so enjoy the video, and hopefully it's of some use to you. As I said, it's not as short as I would like it to have been, but let's get started. Now I'm going to be fitting a 3-core cable, and as you can see it's quite beefy stuff, and I will be fitting a 13 amp fuse to it. When you buy these plugs, they inevitably come with a 13 amp fuse fitted. So first of all, I'm going to prepare the cable. In order to do that, there are various ways. People sometimes use a pair, oh by the way, the tools I've got are basically a pair of snips, a pair of long nose pliers, a knife, and a screwdriver, either a flat head or a crosshead screwdriver. There are other tools we can use, but I'll come to those in a minute. So let's clear all that away for a moment and look at this. So first of all, we need to measure the length of cable that's going to be needed for that plug. I like to go from the top of the plug here down and about a few millimeters lower than the plug, about that, so the plug would fit easily onto that. Now there are many ways of doing this. Some people like to get a pair of cutters and clip down the end and then peel the sides back. Other people prefer just to saw right down with a knife. I like to do it this way, and a little bit of warning here, I use a fairly sharp knife. I bend the cable, make it flexible, and then I very gradually go round like this, but not very deep, just the outer layer. If you go too deep, you're going to actually cut into the inner cable. Once I've been round a little bit, bend the cable like this so it's flexed, and then you can open that a little bit wider like that, and then bend it the other way and do exactly the same the other way round. If you want to mark it, you can use a magic marker just to mark where you're actually bending the cable, but again not too deep, and just go around the cable like that, and then bend it a few times until you see it opening up. Again and again. It takes a little while, but just be careful and be patient, because this is a way of getting a nice clean cut through the outer insulation of the cable. We're nearly there now, so a little bit more on that side, and I then should, I think that's it done. Pull it there and bend it again and again. Now that should pull off, and as you can see it pulls off very, very neatly, and leaving me with my 3 conductors exposed. That is a good way. I just have a quick check to see I haven't nicked any of the internal insulation, and I haven't, but you see it gives a nice clean end there, so we put that to one side. Inside I have 3 coloured cables. I have the brown, which is the live, the yellow and green, which is the earth cable, and the blue, which is the neutral cable or return cable. And these days that's the standard for cables. Now be aware that some cables you fit may not have an earth, and that may be because the appliance you're fitting it to is plastic or double insulated and doesn't actually need the earth cable. But for this demonstration we're going to use all three cables. So that's that part done. The next part is to open the plug. Inside the plug we've got a number of components. You have the cable clamp here, you have the neutral connection here, and you have the earth connection here, and you have the live connection here, which is a brown connection, and that goes to one side of the fuse. Then there's the fuse, whatever value you're going to fit, and that goes to the pin on the other side. So those are the main components of the plug. What we're going to do now is start to assemble. Can I just say at this point, you may have noticed that I'm putting it on just a piece of cable. I'd rather no one ever did that, because if you plug that in, the other end of the cable could well be shorted out and will go bang, blow the fuse. So I'm only showing you this as a demonstration, but normally this would be connected to an appliance or a piece of equipment at the other end of the cable. So that's just my word of warning at this point. The other word of warning is this: when you're using these plugs and screwing and doing things to them, especially when you're doing things like this, which is pushing down to unscrew things, it's very easy for the screwdriver to slip and hit your finger. I'm a first aider as well with St John Ambulance, and I've dealt with a number of people who have actually injured themselves by screwdrivers going into their hands or into their fingers. So just a word of warning there. The first thing we need to do is release the cable clamp, and to do that I'm going to use a fairly beefy screwdriver because these things are usually very tight, and I'm pushing down and undoing it so that my hand doesn't, if I slip, it doesn't get in the way of or poke me in the hand at all. So I'm going to undo that until it's reasonably loose. And at the top side you can see now I have quite a gap there for the cable to go through. The next job I need to do is to measure the cable. So to do that I'm bringing the cable in, I'm placing it where it needs to go, I'm measuring first of all the earth connection. That one's going to be longer, and it's always better to give it a little bit of flex. Now that one is about right to go in. The next one is the live, and then the last one to go in here is going to be the neutral. So I've got kind of a place where I'm going to actually put those. So I'm going to cut those off in near enough the right place now. So first of all, the earth cable needs to be trimmed a little bit, so I'm going to do that. This one definitely needs trimming. Don't forget to allow enough for the actual connecting bit to go in. So that one's going to be trimmed. And lastly, the earth again. So I'm just going to trim that off like that. Now those are more or less the right lengths now to actually put into the plug. The next job after that is to actually trim the ends of that cable. Once the ends have been prepared, you're ready to actually connect the plug itself. So first of all I'm going to fit in the brown cable to the live one. Note in this plug there's an additional cable guide inside here. You don't want to go over the top because when you screw it down you will pinch it. So I'm just going to angle that a little bit there, and I'm going to push it into the live connector here. Make sure that it goes fully in and that you don't have any whiskers of cable coming out, so that you've got a full connection. Then I'm going to tighten that down fully and make sure it's really tight. The next one I'm going to put in is the blue, which is the neutral. So again, I'm going to angle it down. If you want, you can actually release the pins a little bit and put them in and release the pins to put the cable in, but I don't need to release the pin in this instance. So I'm just going to go in there, and again I'm going to tighten down thoroughly so that is really tight. Make sure you have a decent screwdriver to do this. Now I'm going to make sure these are in their correct positions so nothing's being pinched. I'm now going to run the earth cable up, bend it over again, twist it to make sure that it's got plenty of that there's no ends or bits poking out of it, and making sure the earth cable goes in snugly like that. Once that's done, I can tighten that up as well. Right. That's it fitted. I'm now going to make sure that I've arranged these cables so that nothing is pinching on them, and that is absolutely fine. So there's the plug with the cables fitted. The next job I have to do is put the cable clamp on. Make sure you get the whole of the cable covered with that and you're not on the ends. I refit the cable clamp screw, and again I'm going to just tighten that up so that make sure you get it in correctly, of course. I'm going to tighten that up so that it clamps down thoroughly on the cable. Right, so there is the plug fitted. What I like to do at this point is to just give it a quick blow to make sure that there's no bits of wire or anything in there, and finally a final check to see that it's connected tightly. You can get a variety of fuses depending on what amperage you need. It's important to make sure that your appliance is protected. If it was a radio or a bedside lamp, I would go basically for a 3 amp fuse. They're red, and you can also get different color fuses. I think this one is another 3 amp fuse here. Yeah, that's red, that's 3 amp. Brown is usually the 13 amp, and you can get 2 amp and 5 amp, etc., etc. So have a look on your appliance and see what size fuse, what the amperage is, how many amps it is, and fit the appropriate fuse. Usually the manufacturer will tell you what fuse. And if you're replacing a plug on an appliance, obviously when you look at inside and see what the amperage of the fuse is, replace it with a similar fuse, or take the fuse out of that one, take the 13 amp plug fuse out and pop the other one in. It looks very good, nothing's going to pinch. I then get the top of the fuse, the top of the plug rather, again make sure it's all clean and fit it over there. It should go on very neatly and cleanly. If you have to struggle to push it down, you probably have a cable clamped, but so make sure that's not going to happen. That one's gone down all the way around. It's very snug in there. I'm now going to get the screw, put it back in there, and tighten the plug. Again, and make sure it's done nice and tight. And there you are. That's the 13 amp plug, or the 3-pin plug fitted, and it is the correct British Standard plug. You notice on there that the live and neutral have insulated bits here. Some of the older plugs don't have that on there, and they're the unsafe type. The earth pin should be metal all the way down, so that when you push the plug in, you get an earth connection first, so if anything should go wrong, you're protected. And as you pull the plug out, should you get your fingers in here, it will disconnect itself, and it prevents you touching live terminals or neutral terminals on there. So look for that on your plugs. If you have plugs that need replacing, when should you replace them? Well, when they're damaged, when they're faulty, when the leads are loose in them, when they're old, and when they probably don't comply with that standard. So that's it. Now obviously this plug is not terminated at the other end, so it's a dangerous situation. So what I'm going to do now is connect it to a piece of equipment before I actually plug it in. Thank you for watching my video about fitting a plug. Sorry it wasn't quite as short as I wanted it to be. I've actually terminated my plug onto a piece of cable and a new piece of cable onto this this extension adapter cable, which had a tatty piece of cable on it, and it needed a new cable and a new plug. So that's how I've terminated that one. Hopefully you found the video helpful. I know there's lots of stages to it and it may seem a bit drawn out at times, but I think it's useful a useful skill to have, and if you're dealing with repairing or mending or doing whatever to a piece of kit, then fitting the plug is quite an essential element of that. Thank you for watching. I'll be back again soon with a little bit with going back to my radio roots with some vintage radio, and so my next video will be on a fairly old piece of vintage radio. Hope you've enjoyed this, and if you liked it, well, just say so, and if you don't, well, just ignore it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again very soon. Take care.